Hi, my name's Anna Serin. I'm Director of Listings Development with the Canadian Securities Exchange, and you're joining us for another weekly market recap. I'm joined today by my co-host, Bruce Campbell with StoneCastle Investment Management. Thank you for joining me, Bruce.
Yeah, a long weekend ahead of us here.
It is a long weekend. I can't wait. We're not allowed to go anywhere, but it's a long weekend.
That's right, yeah. It's the May 2-4 weekend that actually lines up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's supposed to be a gorgeous weekend. So I hope everyone enjoys. Stay home, stay safe. A little bit going on this week. Obviously, we have a long weekend coming on. You could kind of feel in the markets this week. It almost feels like the first official week of summer. Things start to slow down a little bit. There was some earnings that were announced that we'll talk about. TSX hit an all-time high. There was a big merger, potential merger in the rail space we're going to talk about. Of course, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. There was lots of movement there that we're going to break down. And there was a new listing with the CSC that we're going to talk about. Bit of an interesting product they're creating. So let's start with earnings. What happened?
Well, we just continue to see more earnings come out through earnings seasons, and they've been quite strong. I mean, if you look at the comparables to last year, we were obviously falling off a cliff sort of the end of February, beginning of March last year. So the comparables compared to a year ago are quite strong. And then the actual numbers have been good, but the guidance has also been good. There's, a lot of strong guidance out there. So, it's been a volatile week in the markets, but that being said, it's also been, positive for a number of companies who've reported and had strong numbers. So obviously that's what we like to see. The market moves higher on stronger earnings. So that's great to see.
And so are these earnings recovery earnings, or are they actually better than what were before? Because obviously it was a year ago we went into lockdown. So obviously earnings went down on a lot of these companies. Is this recovery from that, or is it more than it was before?
It depends on where you break it down and where you look. So certainly there are companies that have exceeded their 2019 earnings numbers by quite a great margin. There's a lot of others that are just up from where they were last year. If you look like something like, the airline industry, that obviously it's going to be down from where it was 2019, but it can be up from where it was a year ago. So, there's an example of an industry that, has good comps compared to last year, but still down. Whereas if you had, something like, if you looked at the, in the materials sector or the forestry sector, those numbers are up way in excess of where they were in 2019.
Crazy. It'll be interesting to see what happens with the airlines, because they've obviously had a pretty rough year. But I know people are kind of hedging that they're going to have a big heyday when everyone can get back on a plane. It'll be interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, it might take a little longer than a lot of people expect, but I mean, the market always looks forward. So even though the numbers probably don't ramp up as fast as people expect, the demand and the surplus will probably be there. And I mean, the issue is going to be capacity with the airlines. They've, really shut their capacity down quite significantly. And how fast can they bring that capacity up? One, and, kind of what's the ease of travel? Because, it's not going to probably be as easy as it was before. We all thought that going through security was a pain. Now you're going to go through security, but you're also going to get, a bunch of swabs up your nose probably along the way. So it's going to be difficult.
It's definitely going to look differently, right? The TSX hit an all-time high. Now, I was reading up on this to try and wrap my head around what happened. It seems like there was a bunch of reasons and a bunch of forecasts of why this happened. Tell me what you think about what happened this week with the TSX.
Well, I mean, it's been a volatile week, but the TSX really plodded along and hit that all-time high. And if you kind of think about what the big sectors are on the TSX, materials, energy, and the biggest being financials, as the financials have done well because of the fact that you have energy and materials doing well, so that pushes them up. They're going to be reporting coming up here, and so we'll really see what the expectation is and whether or not the expectation lives up to the reality. And then with the fact that you've seen kind of a move in the precious metals on top of the base metals, you've seen the forestry stocks are a little bit off their high, but they're still fairly strong. And then energy's been, quite strong. We're seeing the price of energy continue to move up. And then a lot of the companies are getting, more interest. That's really just pushed the TSX. And then you sort of go subsectors. There's, been quite a bit of interest there as well. Whether or not it's the staples sector or the real estate, those have all been strong. So it's just kind of all added on and pushed the TSX to that all-time high. Soon we'll be, knocking on that $20,000 or 20,000 level.
Crazy. Well, that's great news. And does this have any correlation with the Canadian dollar because it's still strong?
Well, I mean, obviously the Canadian dollar is more a function of people buying into the Canadian market and buying our goods than really anything. And so as long as, money flow continues to flow into Canada from foreign investors, and those foreign investors, or not necessarily foreign investors, but foreign consumers are using our products, then those US dollar denominated goods that have been sold, the US dollars are repatriated back into Canada where they have to buy Canadian dollars, and that pushes the Canadian dollar up.
Right, and that's good for us. Okay, there was a big. Well, I guess it's sort of an official merger in the rail industry. Kansas City Southern agreed to the CN Rail merger, and they rejected a bid by CP. Break that down for us. What happened?
Yeah, so if you remember a few weeks ago, we talked about this. CP was the first to show up. They said, look, we want to buy Kansas City Southern, make this, large North American wide rail network. And, the stock obviously, both stocks obviously responded based on that. And then what we saw happen was CN came in with a bid that was, in Kansas City Southern's opinion, superior to the CP rail bid. And so the management of Kansas City Southern has said they're going to vote in favor of the CN rail deal and not the CP rail deal. So that means that, pending regulatory approval, then CN and Kansas City Southern will merge. It also means, interestingly enough, there was a $700 million break fee that CP will get paid by, effectively get paid by CN, because the money will flow from CN through to Kansas City Southern to CP, but it's $700 million that they'll get just for making the bid and not being successful. And their management's come out and said, look, we could come up with a new bid to take out KCS, but it's not really prudent for us to do it at the price that we'd have to pay.
It was interesting because I was taking a look. This is obviously the regulators need to approve this. Apparently, the last time the regulators had to approve a merger in the rail industry was in the early 90s. So they're scrambling a little bit to try and be able to do this appropriately. But I was kind of surprised by how involved they get in these larger mergers. And they talk about competition within the market, and if this is better for the market as a whole. Like the merger, the amalgamation itself, the regulators really dive in on a granular level, don't they?
Oh yeah, and this is a fairly complicated one as far as competition goes. So, they'll take probably all the time they need and then some to get this decision done.
Right. Okay, Bitcoin. I mean, we're supposed to talk about the stock market, Bruce, but we spend a lot of time talking about Bitcoin. But how can you not? I mean, it's pretty amazing what's going on these days. So tell us what happened with Bitcoin this week.
Well, it's really investing, right? I mean, and not only are there, obviously Bitcoin is the currency itself, but there's a lot of underlying companies now that operate in that sector, whether or not, they're, trading, if they're, regulatory, if they're, miners, number of different areas. So, we, Sunday night, while we were all sleeping, the Bitcoin was dropping like a rock. And so Monday when we came in, it really plummeted down. And we saw a bit of recovery during the week this week. And then today, or again, kind of overnight, what we saw was that, China said they're going to clamp down on mining, which we know a large part of the Bitcoin mining happens in China, which is interesting because, I was wondering whether or not the stock or the Bitcoin price might not rally on that news. If it meant that there was less people mining it, it would be more difficult, and the, price of a Bitcoin might go up, but it just transfers it somewhere else. And it just, I guess, removes a lot of people from the market. So it has had a, fairly significant move down again today. And so we're seeing it sort of in a fairly corrective position from where it was when it, sort of got to that 60,000. It hit 30,000 this week, and it's, just off of that now.
So just to remind people about how Bitcoin is done, mining for Bitcoin uses an incredible amount of energy. In fact, they say it uses the same amount of energy to mine Bitcoin as some small countries. Like it's massive, the energy use, just to mine for Bitcoin, which is probably why we see most of it happen in China. So it is interesting that China is clamping down on it. I'm not really sure. Why they're doing it now. I don't know why it's just coming, because this has been known how much energy is used. I mean, Elon came out last week and said, well, he's got concerns about it. Now, all of a sudden, the Chinese government's coming out. So it makes me wonder what's happening in the background, because this isn't brand new information. And just to give you an idea of what happens, when Bitcoin went from, you said it was around 60,000, went down to about 30.
That's right. Yeah.
That wiped $500 billion from the crypto market. That's how much is floating around out there right now. I know it has some of the ETFs concerned about what's going on with it. It's definitely going to have a ripple effect. And Elon Musk kind of keeps going out there. The other thing, I didn't think about this, but the stock market has hours and days that it operates. Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, they trade 24 hours a day, right?
I think it's just under 24. It's like 23 or 23 and a half hours. There's like a slight period of time where they transition from market to market where they don't trade. But yeah, generally it's being traded all the time.
So like you said, when we're asleep, it's trading somewhere else. Anyway, we'll continue to watch and see what happens. It's unfortunate, and we do talk about its speculative nature, and I think this is a reminder of how speculative it is. To go from 60,000 to 30,000 in a week is that's a pretty big deal.
It was a little over a week, because that was the high. 60,000 was probably
Right.
3 or 4 weeks ago now, I think, is where it was. So it's pulled off that high by that much. That didn't all happen this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll see what happens. I mean, again, I guess the conspiracy theorist inside of me wonders, Elon having these concerns and the Chinese government, it seems pretty tied together in timing. We had a new listing at the CSE. Just wanted to bring this up. The listing actually was earlier this month. It's Poda Lifestyle and Wellness. And this is an interesting market that we're starting to see. I mean, health and wellness, it's interesting. I think in the 70s and 80s and 90s, health and wellness was not necessarily a part of the stock market. And this seems to be that if you're going to be on the stock market these days, that has got to be a part of it. So this is actually a tobacco company. Apparently it is part of a multi-billion-dollar heat not burn market. So I'm assuming that's when they say heat not burn, that's all vaping, I would assume. So they listed with us earlier this month, and they just actually completed another private placement and brought in one of the big execs from Philip Morris, which is one of the largest tobacco companies in the world. So congratulations to them. Welcome to the CSE. But it's interesting because it seems even tobacco is going down the health and wellness route, huh?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's more focused on that. Probably, with COVID, that's going to accelerate the health and wellness revolution as well, because obviously we realize that being healthy is important, and the healthier you are, the stronger you have to fight off any type of infection.
Well, that's a really good point. We grew up, I think we grew up with an understanding about health in our generation. And I see my children growing up with an understanding of immune systems and that being number one key. So health, wellness, immune systems, everyone's safe and healthy. Okay, so we're going into a long weekend. We had another great week as the Cannabis Investor Series. It was on health and wellness. On that note, it is on CSC TV. Make sure you check it out if you missed it. And we will be doing our final week next week. It is the global markets. We'll be talking about the global cannabis economy. Some amazing guest speakers next week, and we're taking a tour around the world. So make sure that you join us. If you hit the subscribe button on CSC TV, we'll make sure that we let you know when all of this content comes to YouTube, but make sure that you join us. You can register on our website. Bruce, what should we think about going into next week?
Well, I mean, I guess a few things. The earnings for the Canadian financials are coming out, and then the second thing that we are sort of have our eyes on is technology and whether or not we're starting to see a bit of a reacceleration there. It's been going sideways for a bit, and now we're potentially seeing a reacceleration. We've seen a couple other of our small cap names that that we follow that have started to reaccelerate here as well. So that's what we're watching.
Nice. That's great. Well, listen, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you next week, and have a great long weekend.
Yeah, have a nice long weekend.
Thank you.